The boardroom had never been this quiet. Not when millions of dollars were on the line, not when executives had resigned, and not even when the company nearly collapsed 3 years earlier. But that morning, every person sitting around the long glass table was staring at one man who had walked into the room wearing a faded blue shirt, inexpensive black trousers, and shoes polished so carefully that the worn leather still showed at the edges. He stood alone beneath the bright afternoon light pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a thin folder against his chest while the most powerful man in the company stared at him with open disbelief. "Who do you think you are?" the CEO snapped. The single father lowered his eyes for a moment, took a quiet breath, and answered with only a few words. What he said next would change the direction of the company, and expose a truth nobody in that room was prepared to hear. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, second chances, and quiet courage can change someone's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. His name was Tavian Mercer, a 38-year-old single father who had spent most of his adult life working jobs that people rarely noticed. He had repaired office equipment, stocked warehouses, delivered supplies, and spent the last 4 years working in the maintenance department of Sterling Crest Technologies, one of the most respected technology companies in the city. Nobody at the company knew much about him because Tavian never talked about himself. He arrived before most executives, worked until his shift ended, and left quickly because his 11-year-old daughter, Soraya, was waiting for him at home. Since her mother had passed away several years earlier, Tavian had become both parents, both providers, and sometimes the only person standing between his daughter and the fear that tomorrow might be harder than today. Their apartment was small, their furniture was old, and their kitchen table had a loose leg that Tavian kept promising to repair. But every evening, he made dinner, checked Soraya's homework, listened to her dreams, and reminded her that difficult circumstances never had the right to decide what kind of person she would become. Tavian's co-workers respected him because he never complained. When a pipe burst on the 6th floor, he stayed late to clean the water. When a computer server room overheated, he noticed the problem before the alarm system did. When an elderly employee dropped a box of personal belongings near the lobby, Tavian quietly carried everything to her car without expecting thanks. What nobody knew was that Tavian had once studied engineering. He had been only a few months away from completing his degree when his family situation changed, forcing him to leave school and find immediate work. He had always told himself that education was not wasted simply because life had interrupted it. The things he learned remained inside him, waiting for another opportunity. That opportunity arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Tavian was inspecting an electrical panel on the 4th floor when he overheard 2 senior managers discussing a major software failure affecting one of the company's newest products. The system had been crashing repeatedly, costing the company thousands of dollars every hour. The engineers had tried several solutions, but nothing worked. Tavian recognized the pattern immediately. He had seen a similar problem years earlier while studying industrial systems. He quietly wrote a possible explanation on the back of an old maintenance form, folded it, and placed it in his pocket. He knew he was only a maintenance worker. He knew nobody had asked for his opinion. Still, that evening, after finishing his duties, he left the note on the desk of the department supervisor with no name attached. The next morning, everything changed. The engineers discovered that Tavian's theory was correct. The problem wasn't the software itself but a communication conflict between 2 separate systems. Once they corrected the connection, the crashes stopped. The company avoided what could have become a disastrous financial loss. But instead of celebrating, the executives began asking who had discovered the issue. The supervisor eventually admitted that the first useful explanation had come from someone in maintenance. Word traveled upward until it reached the CEO, Cashin Vale, a 47-year-old executive known for building Sterling Crest into a billion-dollar company through discipline, intelligence, and an almost frightening refusal to tolerate mistakes. Cashin demanded that Tavian be brought to the executive boardroom. Tavian almost refused. Not because he was afraid, but because Soraya had a school presentation that afternoon, and he had promised to be there. He called her teacher, explained the situation, and promised his daughter he would make it home before dinner. Then he entered the elevator wearing the same faded shirt he had worn that morning. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, Tavian immediately felt out of place. The carpet was thick enough to silence footsteps. The walls displayed photographs of company founders and awards. Assistants moved quickly through polished hallways carrying tablets and expensive folders. Tavian followed a receptionist into the boardroom, where 12 executives were already seated around the enormous table. Cashin stood at the far end. He looked at Tavian's clothes, then at the maintenance badge clipped to his belt. His expression hardened. "You are the maintenance employee who interfered with the engineering department," he said, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. Tavian calmly explained that he had not intended to interfere. He had simply noticed something and left a note. Cashin's patience disappeared. "Who do you think you are?" he demanded. Every eye turned toward Tavian. He could have defended himself. He could have reminded them that his idea had saved the company. He could have accused the CEO of judging him by his clothes. Instead, Tavian looked at the long table, then through the windows at the bright city outside. His voice remained quiet when he finally answered. He said he was nobody important in that room. He was simply a father who had learned that when you see a problem, you should try to fix it instead of walking past it. Nobody spoke. Then Tavian added that he had not come upstairs expecting a promotion, recognition, or money. He had only left the note because hundreds of employees depended on the company staying strong, and he knew what it felt like when one unexpected problem could change an entire family's future. Something shifted in Cashin's expression. For the first time, the CEO looked beyond Tavian's worn shirt and saw the person standing inside it. But the meeting was far from over. The chief financial officer revealed that Sterling Crest was preparing to eliminate more than 40 maintenance and support positions as part of a restructuring plan. Tavian immediately understood what that meant. People like him would lose their jobs while executives celebrated the savings. He quietly asked whether the company had considered retraining those employees for technical roles instead of replacing them. One executive laughed under his breath and suggested that people with maintenance backgrounds were not qualified for advanced technology positions. Tavian looked at him and said nothing. Instead, he opened his folder. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, diagrams, repair records, and suggestions he had developed during his 4 years at the company. He had been observing inefficiencies nobody in the executive offices noticed because he was the person who walked through the building every day. He knew which machines wasted energy, which systems failed repeatedly, which departments struggled with outdated equipment, and which employees had skills that were being ignored. The room slowly changed from skeptical to uncomfortable. The chief operations officer realized that Tavian had identified problems the company had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to solve. Cashin asked why he had never presented these ideas before. Tavian answered that nobody had ever asked. Those 4 words hit harder than any accusation. Cashin dismissed the meeting, but instead of ordering Tavian back to maintenance, he asked him to stay. For nearly an hour, the CEO listened while Tavian explained his ideas. There was no arrogance in his voice. No bitterness. Only the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years solving problems without anyone watching. The following week, Cashin suspended the restructuring plan. He created a pilot program that gave experienced support employees paid technical training and opportunities to advance within the company. Tavian was offered a position helping design the program. He accepted, but only after confirming that the hours would allow him to continue caring for Soraya. Months passed. The changes were remarkable. Employees who had once felt invisible began contributing ideas. Energy costs dropped. Equipment failures decreased. Productivity improved. Tavian's program became one of the company's most successful internal initiatives. But the most important change happened outside the office. One sunny afternoon, Soraya walked into Sterling Crest for the first time. She had been invited to attend a small employee event celebrating the new training program. Tavian watched proudly as she stood beside him, holding the school project she had once worried he would miss. Cashin approached them. He looked at Tavian's daughter and told her that her father had taught the company something no business course had ever managed to teach him: sometimes the most valuable person in a room is the one nobody thought to listen to. Tavian smiled, but he didn't take credit. He simply placed a hand on Soraya's shoulder. That evening, father and daughter walked home together beneath a clear daytime sky, talking about her school presentation and the dinner they would make. Their apartment was still small. The kitchen table still had a loose leg. Their lives had not suddenly become perfect. But something had changed. Tavian no longer felt invisible. And Cashin Vale, the man who once demanded to know who Tavian thought he was, eventually understood that greatness had never been about titles, expensive suits, or the number of people sitting beneath you. It was about what you did when nobody was watching. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Sometimes one small act of kindness can remind someone that their struggles have not made them invisible. And before you leave, I have one special request: comment "I see the good in people" below if you believe everyone deserves to be heard before they are judged. Because Tavian's quiet answer was never really about proving who he was. It was about reminding the world that a person's value cannot be measured by their position, their clothing, their bank account, or the chair they sit in. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to shout. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying the solution everyone else desperately needs. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to listen for a life to change forever.